With that, would you please welcome Judge Helen Shores Lee.
Thank you very much, Paula. You know, as I sat here and I watched this movie, The Four Little Girls, which I had never seen before, it just brought back so many memories of my own childhood. Memories that were indeed not very pleasant ones. But I want to talk to you a little bit today about celebrating past accomplishments as we look to the future. As we move forward into the future, it means very little, unless we look back and remember from whence we came. Knowledge of the past always helps us put into perspective our vision for the future. And the old adage, if you don't remember the past, we're doomed to repeat it, applies to this country's civil rights journey. You have but to look at this Supreme Court this past month and a half, who struck down Section 5 of the Voters' Rights Act. That was just the start. I hope that we don't stand by and let them whittle away other parts of that act, but we well seem to be on our way. The year of 1963 in Birmingham, Alabama was one of violence and civil unrest, as you saw from the movie. A reporter for the Time magazine called the state of Alabama a state of deep superstitions, fierce prides, intense sudden violence, and voiceless fears. Alabama always had a reputation as a stronghold for white supremacy, and civil rights activists made Birmingham a major focus of their effort to desegregate the Deep South. Birmingham had much unfinished business during that time, and it was 1963, in fact, the spring of 1963. Well, let me start at the beginning. In January of '63, George Wallace was sworn in as governor for the state of Alabama. Then we come to the spring of '63. This was the spring was the peak of the civil rights unrest during that time. It was a time when Reverend Shuttlesworth had asked Dr. Martin Luther King to come to Birmingham. And Birmingham became the site of Project Confrontation. It was this year that we had the sit-in demonstrations, we had the boycott of the stores, but they didn't call them boycotts because there was an ordinance against boycotting in Birmingham. So they called it selective buying to get around the ordinance and to avoid being arrested for boycotting the department stores. In May of 1963, we had the Children's March through Birmingham, which you saw on the film. And we also had the March on Washington. All of these things were taking place. And as the civil rights movement gathered steam, particularly with the March on Washington in 1963, the federal laws to integrate the school system in Alabama was coming to a close. On June the 11th in 1963, James Hood and Vivian Malone integrated the University of Alabama. On August 21st, our home was bombed. The papers reported that no one was injured in that bombing, but during the first bombing, there were thousands of people who gathered around the house. My mother and sister were at the movies watching Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. My sister, if she were here, would tell you today she never found out what happened. because somebody came and got them out of the movies to let them know that there had been an incident at the house. They only got 3 blocks, within 3 blocks of the house, and they had to get out of the car. They couldn't go any further because of the crowds that had gathered. There were bricks and rocks being thrown at the policemen. The policemen were firing over the heads of the people that had gathered, and there were a couple of people killed during that incident. Well, the paper reported that no one was injured in that bombing, so they came back 2 weeks later and they blew up the other end of the house. First time they blew up one end of the house, and my father was there, but he happened to be in the end where the bedrooms were. 2 weeks later, they came and bombed the house a second time, and on this occasion, my mother was injured. I'll talk about that a little bit later. That was September the 4th was also the day that the schools were ordered integrated in Birmingham. And following the integration of the schools, we had the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. Now, this bombing, the attack spawned international outrage and drew the attention of civil rights activists all over the country. When the house was bombed the second time, I came home. I was living in California at the time. I had been married for 9 months and moved to California because I swore when I was old enough to leave Birmingham, which was after I graduated for high school, I would never, ever return to that God-forsaken city again. Well, I've learned you don't ever say what you're not going to do, because some 14 years later after I left, I did return. But it was, I believe, no coincidence that 5 days after the schools were finally integrated, a bomb was placed at the 16th Street Baptist Church. It was placed there on a Sunday morning where other prominent players in the civil rights movement, meaning the youth, were preparing for the first planned monthly youth worship service. We knew 3 of the little girls. Carol Robinson's mother was my Girl Scout leader. Cynthia Wesley was a close friend of my mother's. They belonged to the same knitting clubs. And at the time the bombing had taken place at our home, it was Miss Wesley who would come to comfort my mother. And little did she know a week or so later that she would lose a child in the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. But even though the legal system was slow to provide justice, the effects of the bombing on the 16th Street